Hello everyone, good afternoon, and let me welcome you to our MCID and EY learning journey. This is going to be a training number 3 out of 5. We're going to cover design thinking. Our own session is consisting out of 5 modules. For those of you who were not able to join us yesterday, we have already covered industry overview, e-gaming marketing, and today we're starting the day off with design thinking. Right after the session ends, we will go straight into the entrepreneur journey, and tomorrow we'll conclude the whole 5 modules with the entrepreneurship basics. And without further delay, let me hand over to Nicole and Mark, who will walk you through the design thinking.
Welcome to the Introduction to Design Thinking workshop. Today we are going to take you through what is design thinking and the entire design thinking process. There are 4 steps we'll cover, and that is discover, define, design, deliver. And we're going to take you through this process with a real life example using gaming and coming up with a game at the end. We will have some time for questions and answers at the end, so we look forward to having a chat to you at that point in time. My name is Nicole Barstow. I am the Associate Director, Wave Space Lead Facilitator in Dubai, and I'm joined today by my colleague Mark Lindop, who is the Creative Director from the Athens Design Lab. And what you can expect from today's session. Well, we really want you to come away thinking about the innovative power of design thinking and how we can use it to come up with really creative ideas and solve some really wicked problems. We want you to learn the key techniques and exercises of design thinking. We will explore some different types of design thinking tools and methodologies, and we'll also understand when and how to use design thinking as well. What else you can expect from this session is to see the entire design thinking process played out on designing a game. So by the end, we're going to show you an actual game that we designed using the design thinking process. And the way that we did this is through a tool called Mural. And we actually went through, we interviewed gamers, we spoke to them, we created a persona profile of the gamers that we spoke to. We then got lots of insights into what they were thinking, their motivations, their goals, their behaviours. We then posed a how might we question. So this was the question we were asking ourselves as we went through the design process. And that question is, how might we create an open world game where teams will choose their own adventure to achieve a common goal? So that's what we were designing for. We then went through a couple of brainstorming processes that we'll talk about later on, and we'll show you how we do them. But we brainstormed lots of great ideas for this game. We refined our ideas using a tool called Round Robin. We then voted on the best ideas and then used those best ideas to come up with a prototype. So we did 2 prototypes, one very basic one, and then one which was much more high fidelity that we then showed to our users. From here, these were the same gamers that we interviewed at the start. We got some great feedback that we can now use to tweak and improve our game. So this is the circle of the design thinking process that we went through, and what you can expect to see at this session is how we use the design thinking process to actually design an e-game. But first off, what is design thinking? You might have heard this term many times, and it might be something that you've heard of before, or it could be very, very new to you. But essentially, what is it? Design thinking is a process and a methodology for creative problem solving. It takes us through some very structured ways of coming up with great ideas to solve problems that are really quite hard to solve for. Now, design thinking is not something that is new. It has been around for some time. So back in the 1960s, it was when Stanford University started teaching their engineering students to approach problems in a bit more of a creative way. And then by the 1980s, we started to apply this thinking on how we could think about designing for people. And it started to evolve in this very people-centric or human-centric approach. By the 1990s, a very famous design agency called IDEO was developing design thinking as their main methodology for solving very complex problems. And by the 2005, the Hasso-Platter Institute of Design at Stanford University, otherwise known as the D School, is created to start teaching design thinking. And today it's used by the world's leading companies, Apple, Coca-Cola, Nike, Samsung, all to create products, to solve business problems, and to come up with unique and innovative ideas. The great thing about design thinking is that it combines both analytical and intuitive thinking. So what do we mean by that? Because we've got this process and this method, we actually look at things through a very selective process. We are very analytical in the ways that we refine ideas. We look at a safe and a very proven method of approaching problems. Then there's, on the other side, the intuitive thinking, this idea of thinking about people's emotions, what motivates them, why do they do the things that they do, how do they behave? And then we bring in the element of design as well. So it's mixing this sort of left brain and right brain as well. And that's what's great about design thinking, is it's in the middle of these two things. It's where innovation takes place. So when do we actually use design thinking? Well, it's best applied to very complex challenges, or what we like to call wicked problems, often found in things like product design or business model design, leadership, or even organizational change. It's where we might have no clear solution, or it might be involving how do we change people's behaviour. It might be something that we've never come across before. I mean, the COVID pandemic is a great example of a wicked problem that the globe has had to have to solve for and look to for solutions. So these are the types of problems or the types of situations when we can start to use design thinking. And where has it been used before? Well, some great examples are, firstly, Starbucks. So Starbucks some years ago started to notice a large drop in their sales. So what they did was they used the design thinking process to try and understand why that was. They interviewed hundreds of their customers and started to understand their motivations and why they were coming back or wanted to come back to Starbucks stores. The main insight that they found was that customers actually wanted this sense of atmosphere, this sense of belonging and relaxation. So based on these insights, Starbucks started to position round tables. So they made solo coffee drinkers more comfortable and less self-conscious when they were in their stores. Another great example is GE Healthcare. So things like the MRI scan is not a really pleasant experience for people, especially for young children. They need to stay very still and it's very dark and isolated and can be quite claustrophobic. So when applying design thinking, GE observed that children wanted a bit more of a creative experience. So they transformed the outside of the MRI scan to different sorts of adventures like pirate ships and spaceships. This made the whole experience a very drastic change for children, and they noticed that fewer children actually needed to be sedated before going into the MRI scan, which was a great outcome. So these children had a much better experience from going into the MRI scan than they did before. So just to wrap up, design thinking is a human-centered process that allows us to get insights into what people really need. They generate solutions, not just revolutionary solutions, but incremental changes, like just using round tables at Starbucks. They help organisations learn faster by this idea of getting continuous feedback from users. It's a very structured step-by-step process that is done in multiple iterations. And by doing this process, you can reduce the risk associated with launching new ideas that have not been tested or have not got feedback. And it's a very collaborative process as well. And we work across disciplines like engineering, like design, and business as well. So in order to really embrace design thinking, we need to start thinking differently. It is a problem-solving mindset and also a methodology. So we need to think about it as a mindset, a defined process, and a mixed method toolkit. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Nicole. So when we talk about the beginner's mindset, what does this mean in terms of the design process and actually generating ideas? What we're looking for here is to try to step away from the things that we know and try to take a look from things, to take a look at processes and ideas and services in a new and fresh way. So we try to remove all of our kind of knowledge in a way, but not our experiences, and then we can kind of use this to kind of move forward. It's about that curiosity that a child has. They're always kind of looking for something new. They look at things from a different angle, and we can also use it to find patterns, listen, and a very strong part of the beginner's mindset is to really listen, not just listen at something somebody says, but actually to go a little bit deeper and to kind of question why they're saying those things. And the second part of this is about co-creation. These experiences are not created in isolation by a lone genius person. The whole process of co-creation is what brings the value to design thinking. By co-creating together, we're able to create much better ideas faster and more innovatively. As part of fostering that kind of co-creation process, it's very important that we don't judge what people say when we actually present an idea. Maybe someone is feeling very self-conscious about presenting an idea, and we shouldn't judge them. We should just let them present their idea, because there are no wrong answers. And from these ideas that may not actually be so great as observed by overall through actually voting or any kind of process like this, actually helps us go to the next idea, which might actually become a great idea. So we should involve all of the people in the process and make sure that we embrace these different viewpoints and build upon those. Another part of the mindset that's very critical is also about speed. It's less about really thinking and analysing what we're actually doing, and a more reactive kind of process. We are working at speed when we're actually doing design thinking processes. Every process that we do is generally time boxed, and we try to adhere to those times so that we don't have people kind of sitting down and slumping down and thinking too deeply in the ideas. As I mentioned on the previous slide, it's all about bouncing the ideas across the room and making sure that we explore as many ideas as possible. Every idea that's explored is just an idea, and it can be as wild and free as we want it to be. The whole process here is to try to explore all of the wild ideas, and then at this later stage we will actually narrow down these ideas to an actual viable solution that actually meets the requirements of the overall user and the customer. So design thinking process, we've discussed this as an overall kind of methodology at the moment. There are actually two parts to this. It's what we call the double diamond process. On the left hand side, you can see this discover and define phase. This is the idea of we're taking a problem, we're diverging from that initial problem, looking broadly at all different types of options in front of us. Then we go through a process of defining what that problem is. So we've already looked broadly at looking for this problem. Now we're kind of converging on the actual design that we should be the starting point of the design that we should be doing. This area is generally called designing the right things. We're trying to make sure that we're solving the right problem at this point. The second stage is then obviously designing the right solution for that problem. So again, from this starting point that we actually have a defined problem to solve, we actually then go again in a very broad, diverged way, looking at many different ideas and trying to evaluate all the different options that are available to us. And then finally, we go back to this converging scenario where we're actually going towards a final prototype solution that we're actually doing, that we'll actually test. So the idea as we go through this process is we start from a problem which we don't know. In the middle, we've kind of defined the problem, and at the end we have a solution. And we're mapping that through these different areas of empathy, through the discovery phase, and insights and opportunities in define, and then in design, we're doing ideation and evaluation, and then finally in deliver, we're doing prototype and test. So basically, when we go through the design thinking process, we have many ways of actually getting to these kind of results, and many different toolkits and tools that we can actually use in order for us to find those different ideas and solutions. We have many ways of actually uncovering different ways to empathize with a user or a customer. We have many ways to define the product, and we have many ways to explore ideation, and then finally the actual prototype and the final testing of the solution. So in the next session, what we'll do is we'll actually dig in further into these areas. So now we've given you the theory about design thinking. What we're actually going to do now is we're going to run you through a hypothetical design process, a design thinking process about designing an e-game. The idea here is to time box the overall process within a week to actually come up with an idea for a game without actually spending a lot of time, money or effort. And that's the benefit of the design thinking process. So I'm now going to pass over to Nicole, who's going to walk you through the first phase of this, which is the discovery.
Thank you, Mark. So the discovery phase is the first stage, as we mentioned. Here it is where we try and expand our understanding of the problem by really going into the minds of the people that we are wanting to design for. We've got to understand their behaviours, their attitudes, their needs, so that we can create the most effective solution. We also need to put aside our assumptions, and we need to really empathise with the users in order for us to fully understand their needs in terms of the game that we are going to design for. So empathy is really critical to the design thinking process because it allows us to really adopt that beginner's mindset, to really think about the design phase from the start. And we do this in 3 different ways. We observe, engage, and immerse. So by observing, what we want to do is we want to view people and their behaviours in the context of how they live. So this might be we watch people how they use a product or how they might use a game. We'd capture quotes, behaviours, we'd reflect on how they actually interact with a game as well. The second way is through engage. Here we might interview people through scheduled interviews where we ask users to reveal their deeper insights into their beliefs and values. And the third way is immersion. So here we experience what they experience as they interact with, say, the game or a product or a solution. And we look at how they act as they go through the process of interacting with the game or product or solution. So for this example, we have decided to use user interviews. So we interviewed 3 gamers to get to understand the way that they play games, how they play games, and what motivates them to play games. When you conduct user interviews, they need to make sure that they are crafted, that is, that they are structured, that you conduct them with at least 2 people so that one person is asking the question and the other is recording down the information that's said by the user. Try and have a script, so that is you pre-prepare the questions that you are going to ask and you're comfortable and relaxed. And you need to make sure that your users are comfortable and relaxed as well. We use open-ended questions and we ask why. Why do you use that particular game? Why do you prefer this game over the other? Are examples of those why questions. And we allow silence to be part of the talking as well. We're listening for great stories, great examples, and great quotes. So in a moment, we're going to play a video of the interviews that we conducted. Here you'll see the types of questions that we used and also the responses from the gamers that we interviewed.
do play it on my phone. Like I do love computers as well, but then PUBG is more like you get the whole experience of it only through a mobile phone. The thing is like this platform is so viral throughout the world that I have connected to people globally. Like I've made friends through the game, like in game. So it's like online gaming, and it's a very good platform for me to interact with my friends I miss back home. So we have a team of 4. We come in online at the same time, and that's where we conversate. Like we have a chat. So that's the reason it goes for such a long span. So it's not only about the game, but the whole experience, like having a chat with your friends, and the daily chit chat what we have along with the gaming aside. So so it's a free voice chat feature in game. So when my like for example, obviously we have a WhatsApp group, so we all ping in like, okay, we're gonna come online at this time, and that's how we like come online at the same time. And then the game allows you to have a max member of 4 in one team. So it's like me and 3 of my other friends from India. And then like so we can speak in game like what we're having right now, of a video call. It's not a video call rather, but it's a voice call. So that's how we chat in game. So it's like we give commands, okay, like you shoot at this person or you find this person, this is your goal, this is your task. So that's how the team game goes on.
Okay.
Yes, that was in 2006, I guess. And that's Pro Evolution Soccer. Trust me, like I got into playing football because of that game.
Wow.
So there was this player called Ronaldinho back then. So I used to control him and play the game, and I was like, this guy is amazing in the game. What will be he like in real life? So I started checking out his videos on YouTube. And back then, like we didn't have a proper internet at home, so it was more of the cyber cafe thing. So I used to spend like around 10 dirhams in the cyber cafe just for 1 hour and just watch his videos. And that man, like it was magical for me, and I started playing football. And like, knock on wood, like I'm the captain of EY football team. So to be very honest with you, PES is a kind of a game which I play to keep my football mind running.
Right.
So that is something like I implement my strategies in my mind. For example, if I have a tournament or a match tomorrow morning, the previous night I will play the game. So that's like more of a focus zone for me, because I practice my tactics, what I'm going to play tomorrow. I'm going to practice it on my phone. And being the captain, obviously, I have to like instruct the team to do what, or this position or that position thing. So that's how I plan the whole strategies in game and implement them on the field. So moving to PUBG is more of a strategy based game. So that is like, it gives you a bit of stress because you never know who's going to shoot at you from where. So you have to be alert all the time. You have to communicate with your team. So there is teamwork there. Teamwork, communication, it's very important in that game. And this game is basically, there are like 100 people landing in a place at the same time from a plane, and they are divided into 4s. So like each team goes to a certain location. You go and pick up some guns, and I know that sounds a bit violent, but it's just a game after all. But then in the actual strategies, yes, you have to be very attentive in that. You have to plan a lot of things, so it keeps your brain running. So what happens is each game, the maximum span of a game is around 40 minutes. 35 to 40 minutes, depending on how you play. So the actual goal is basically collecting some loot. That's the guns, your like your helmet, your vest to be alive, like getting some medikits and all, collecting them. And then you go on finding other squads to kill them. So you finish off squads and you reach to the position. So you get a number saying that, okay, your team's on position number 10, or 3, or 2, or 1. So if you're the last team standing, that's how you win. So it's called winner, winner, chicken dinner. That's the tagline of the games. I'm more of a sniper. So I like to hide in the bushes and maybe on the grass and everything, and then go and
snipe from a distance.
Basically, everyone has their own role. So one would be like assaulter. So he will always like head the assault. He will charge in with the main gun, like the AR, maybe that's M416 or something. And then the next person would be a grenadier. So he just uses grenades. The third one would be the medic, just having the medicines to supply to the whole team. And me, it's my job to scout like where the enemy is, take a shot from a long one. So it's like we knock one person down and then we rush together, because then it becomes 4v3. So we have advantage of one man. There are these small quick game available as well, like domination, like two teams fighting for domination over a space. So it's a very quick game that's like lasts for 5-10 minutes. So either it will like 4 full games and then maybe 2 dominations, or maybe we'll go for 5 full games and 1 domination before we sleep. So it's like start with a domination, like a warm up to our fingers, basically I can say, and then a cool off at the end, and then that's when we go to sleep.
So mostly I play strategic games, so games that focus on strategy. I don't know if you've ever heard of a game called Civilization or Tropico. So basically building your own country or building your own city and basically taking it from the ground up. So I like more strategic games more than the one I mentioned, NBA, which is more a sports game. So I usually focus on more strategic games to kind of expand my mind and actually think about what I'm doing. First of all, it helps me take my mind out of other stuff. So whether it's work, whether it's what's happening in my life, I kind of focus into like another, let's say, virtual life in front of me that enables me to like dive deep into it and think about what I want to do in that certain video game. Second of all, it's just enjoyable. I enjoy playing video games. It's fun. It's fun. For example, in shooter games, shooting people is not fun, but shooting people in video games is fun. You know what I mean? And if you shoot them first, it means you're just better than them, and that's the key aspect of gaming, I guess. You just want to be better than everyone else you're playing. Okay, so basically, I think number one thing is graphics. Graphics is a big important thing for me. I don't like these boxy type of video games where it's unclear what the thing is or the person is or you know what I'm talking about. Second thing I think is interactiveness. So how much can I do in that game? Am I only shooting people? Can I do other stuff? Like what if someone shoots me first and I die? Can I do stuff while I'm dead, or am I just cut out for the rest of the round, for example? So interactiveness is a very good point. I want it to be challenging. I don't want it to be easy, especially in terms of single player games where it's against an AI or something or a computer. I like it to be a little bit challenging, so different difficulty levels, I guess, is a very important point. So before I had a job, it was very difficult getting my parents to pay for these type of things, you know. But now since I work, it's fine, but I don't want it to be pay to play. So if I'm buying a skin and it doesn't affect my gameplay, that's fine. But if I'm paying to get, let's say, a speed boost or something, that would be pretty unfair. But otherwise, if it's just cosmetic, then it's fine. If you're invested in the game, you know what I mean? Like I spent how many hours on the game? Probably as much as I work, you know? So it costs look good to feel good. So I like both, but what I'll say is I do prefer open world. So if you look at games like Assassin's Creed and all these type of games where it's open world and you do reach an end of a story, but you can play after that, you know, in this open world, those are basically the best type of games, I think. Okay. It gives you the option. If you want to stop, you can stop. If you want to continue and just do random stuff on the side, then that's fine. I like the character progression. So you start out as a player overall rating of like, let's say 60 or something, and then you get to progress as you go on and play more all the way up to becoming like a superstar or something. So it's something that I was never able to achieve in my life, and it's very cool to see my virtual self basically winning the World Cup, or you know what I'm saying.
from 99 all the way to say mid 2000s, I got more into online games, mostly MMOs, the massive multiplayer online genres. Now, what I like about that genre is the reward system. So you have this sense of achievement, this sense of fulfillment every time you unlock an item or you unlock a trophy that you can basically show off to all of your friends and be like, hey, look at me, I'm this awesome, amazing player that got these amazing achievements. But as the years went by, this genre started to dwindle down. Like I started to lose interest in that genre because most of the rewards that were there can be bought.
Yes.
And that sense of achievement is pretty much gone. Like I could have spent like 2-3 weeks trying to get a certain item, and then I find this guy who has a wallet of the same item, and like, you know, the sense of achievement is pretty much gone. I started to get into the open world genre. Now, what's great about the open world genre is that the amount of freedom that you get and the creativity that the game allows you to make, and the fact that it's non-linear. So games back then used to be very linear. No matter what you do, you will always achieve the same results.
Yeah.
Nowadays, developers are getting more creative with this. They're becoming more non-linear. You can approach the same objectives in multiple ways and you get different results, which kind of like impacts the story to an extent as well. That's another thing that changed in today. I tried getting into the social aspects of the game, and I do try to play multiplayer games every now and then. Yeah. However, playing multiplayer games with strangers it's kind of different from when you play with people you know. Like when you play with people you know, there's more coordination.
Yes.
And you make more memories that way, and it's these things that you can relate with someone else. Like say, oh, do you remember that time that we both went into that certain place and we both did that certain thing? And you can't have that with a stranger, because once you play with a stranger, then that stranger is gone forever. I would definitely love to play multiplayer games. I definitely want to get back to the MMO genre, the massive multiplayer on, because MMOs are normally open world as well. So, but then again, you have that element of pay to win.
Yeah.
That you no longer need to work hard for the type of items or equipment that you get. You can just buy them straight away, and that kind of kills my motivation to a certain extent. And like I said, I don't really mind playing with strangers, but it could get pretty repetitive at a certain point.
Okay.
When you play with your friends, you're always having fun, regardless of what you're doing, to be honest. I like to explore every single aspect, because sometimes the developers will leave little bits of secrets and Easter eggs that reward people who explore their games. And obviously you won't get this exploration in non-open world games. Like stage-based games, there's no reward for exploring in a stage-based game. The idea of a stage-based game is just to progress through the stages, basically. An open world game gives you that environment in which you can explore and be creative. Well, from the game I played the most, the motivation is winning. I like to win, and I am a very competitive person. And getting that adrenaline, that feeling of achievement, is always a great driver when playing games. Now, as for the open world games, I normally play it for the story. Now, I love reading, and reading, when you read a book, you also try to imagine the events in your head. But when you're playing the game, the events are already unfolding in front of your eyes. And going through story-based games, it's kind of like watching a movie as well, like not necessarily just reading a book. And with every game, there's also a message, like a hidden message, a hidden theme that you kind of learn a bit more about yourself, especially if you're relating to the character. So for the open world games of today, there's normally one huge task that you plan to get to. However, you need to do multiple other tasks to get to that one monumental task that you have to achieve. And trying to get to that monumental task, like the story around that task, is the interesting part.
Okay.
And in order to get to that point, I need to do these multiple smaller tasks. It's like climbing up the ladder.
The second part of the process is define. And here we go from all the information that we've received from our users, and we try and converge this information to really narrow down on the problem that we are trying to solve for. So define is a very important part of the process, because here we analyse, we synthesise our observations, and we try and identify where it is that the user's problems exist. We look for any key insights or any user patterns that can help us shape our solution. And then using those insights, we try and come up with a point of view, which is an actionable problem statement. Now, a key part of this phase is thinking about users' needs and insights. So needs are these emotional and physical necessities. They help us really define the challenge, and they're directly captured from traits from the interviews and observations that we hear and see. Now, insight is this observation or realization that can be leveraged to help us really get into the heart of the design challenge. So this comes from when we ask ourselves why, or when we notice any behaviour that might be unusual or different during an interview or an observation. So these are the things we are looking for as we go through the process. So some of the tools that we use in the defined stage of the process are things like personas. So persona is a fictional character which brings together several of the traits that we've found through interviewing real users. And the persona represents these user types so that we can start to personify the user group that we're designing for. And they should be representative of the target audience we're designing for. They've got to be realistic and believable, and they also need to be valuable. They've got to showcase key user insights and needs. Another tool that we use is what's called the empathy map. An empathy map is a collaborative tool that everyone in the design group uses to put together deeper insights around people. So here we have 4 areas that we look at: what the user says and does, what the user hears, what the user sees, and what they think and feel. So this helps us create a picture of the user that we can use to design with. The other great thing is to think about insights. So the insights are incredibly valuable because they're going to help us structure the problem that we're solving for. So what we do is we start to cluster some quotes, learnings, we start to look for common themes, and we start to connect the various data points into one insight that is the observation or the revelation of behaviour that really gives us that little bit of an aha moment. Point of view is another tool that we use to phrase the problem from a persona's point of view. It brings together their needs, their insights, and helps us create a written point of view from the user. It articulates the direction for the solution, and it's got to be easy enough for everyone to understand. The final in the define phase is the how might we question. And this is how we frame our challenges. And we frame them in this way because the how is actually an action. How might we is a collaborative approach. The use of the word we implies that we're all working together on this solution as well. So it includes the how might we do something for our user or persona, considering the constraints of the insights or the restrictions that we have. So now let's move to the creative part of design thinking. We're going to actually go through the process using our mural. So here we are starting with the define stage. We've already, through the discover stage, heard from our users. And what we want to do is we want to build a persona profile to capture what we heard from our users, and we represent all of what we heard with a persona. So the persona that we've created is Mohammed, and he represents all the users that we spoke to over the previous days. And so what we did was we got the team together to go through the process of co-creating some ideas. So we first of all captured what were some of the feelings and experiences that Mohammed had. So here we heard things like that there was a sense of achievement that was really important. The idea of escapism, character selection, and being able to have set characters was important as well, as was things like competing against others, and this whole sense of competition, achievement, camaraderie was really important to our persona. The other thing we explored was some of the pain points. So what were some of the things that they didn't like about games? Well, we heard that pay to play wasn't something that they weren't preferring, and it detracted from that sense of achievement if you knew other people could pay to get certain parts of the game. The other thing was things like wanting to have aligning for different time zones with different friends, or this idea of lack of fairness throughout the game as well. Some of the goals and motivations that kept people playing was things like exploring new worlds. They wanted this idea of adventure and discovery, and it was me versus the world. The other important thing to them was that it was very social and all their friends are on it. So what were some of the great quotes that we heard? Well, we heard, when my team wins, it's the same feeling as when I win. This very, very strong sense of achievement and wanting to win and compete. The idea that I shape the story, I'm in control, I create the destiny, I create the world was really important as well. Look good to feel good was one of the highlight quotes that we heard during the interviews. This idea that it's okay to pay to make sure your character had all the great equipment and looked great in the game. And then, of course, winner, winner, chicken dinner, this whole sense of achievement, winning with your friends, and a fun way of capturing that winning sensation. So this is our persona, and this is who we are going to be designing for as we move through the design thinking process. So once we've created our persona, the next part of the process is actually to think about what are the key insights. Now, insights are observations about human behaviour that allows us to see the users or the gamers from a different or fresh perspective. It's some new discoveries about the underlying motivations, what drives people to play the games that they do, or to how they play the games that they do as well, which is really interesting. So in terms of our group, the insights that they were able to capture were these. Basically, the character range is really important. The idea of moving from a novice to a master was really important to our players. Also, being able to explore different time zones, going through history back and forth, having a common mission was important as well. The idea of being able to play a long game, but also a short game to build skills was important. And really what was quite interesting for us was this idea of it being something quite social, that people wanted to play games in teams and they wanted to play games with their friends, and it was the friends against the world. The other things that really struck us was they were really keen on being able to control their own destiny or control their own adventure. And they wanted to be able to incorporate this idea of strategy and skills. There was lots of rituals associated with the game and how they played it with their friends, the idea of heroes and villains, goodies and baddies, and this sense of morality and fairness throughout the game. So from there, once we've got our insights, what we came back to was, what is our point of view? And so if we think about our persona, Mohammed, what we say is Mohammed needs to play a game with his friends because, and this is the surprising insight, they want to explore and have adventures to take on the world. So once we've got this point of view, which Mohammed needs to play a new game with his friends because they want to explore and have adventures to take on the world, we then start to define what is the problem that we are going to solve for. And we do this by creating a how might we question. So the group brainstormed and we debated, we discussed, we voted to come up with the question that we were going to solve for. And that is, how might we create an open world game where teams will choose their own adventure to achieve a common goal? And this is the problem that we're going to work towards.
So we've been exploring at the beginning of the sessions that Nicola ran you through. We actually explored the problem space. Now what we're doing is we're moving on to the solution space. Obviously with the how might we question, we have our starting point for the design process. As you can see with the design, obviously it's a phase where we're actually diverging. So we've got this problem and now we need to look at it in many different ways. The idea within the design phase is to try to generate as many ideas as possible and to generate ideas that are very wild and different, and explore all types of different ways of coming with the different concepts that could solve this problem. At this stage, nothing is off the table, we just generate new ideas. And at the end of the define phase, what we'll do is we'll shortlist the ideas and then we'll build those into a final prototype that we test for users, with users. So what we'll do first of all is we have a brainstorming session. So we're taking the starting point is the how might we question. So obviously we're looking to try to develop a game here for gamers, and we're brainstorming around this how might we question in terms of different ideas and different ways we can generate solutions and different areas that we can focus on. We don't have one particular method for brainstorming, but we use multiple different ways to actually brainstorm. So at the beginning, we did a general brainstorming session with this particular design thinking training. And then the second, after this initial brainstorming, we did what we call a round robin process. Round robin is basically a design process where someone comes up and generates an idea and then passes that on to the next person, and the next person works on that idea to enhance it and make it richer, and then passes it around the table to the next person. So the idea is it goes round and round, and people build upon the idea, making it better and better and better. After this, what we generally do is we vote on these selection of ideas, and the best ideas that we like, we move them forward to the next design process in terms of the overall, the way that they look, the way that they design, how they answer the brief. So we use a method to evaluate these called an idea funnel. We look at the designs and we evaluate the ideas based around three main criteria. One is the desirability. Has this design answered the problem that the users have actually mentioned in the interviews or any research that we've done? So obviously we interviewed 3 gamers. What did they think? Will this idea be useful for them? Did it resonate with some of the insights that they said? Another way we evaluate an idea is if it's technically feasible. Is this something that can actually be realized, or have we designed something that technology doesn't allow it actually to be made? And the third thing is from a viability point of view, from a business. So from a business perspective, can it be made? So what we evaluate is all of these 3 things together, but what we're really looking for is that special thing in the middle, which is the wow effect. It's like, is this idea meeting all of these things, but is also radical and futuristic and something really fresh and new and innovative? And in the next stages, we'll take you through to the mural that we've actually created, where you'll see the brainstorming session. You'll also see how we did the round robin, should I say, and also then how we went through and did the voting on that to the selected and finalized ideas. Okay, so now we've gone through a process of obviously having insights in terms of the overall user, what they want to do, how we believe that we can kind of create a solution for them that captivates this how might we question. The how might we question becomes the starting point for the design process. So as you can see, we're kind of looking to the process of exploring and brainstorming different ideas. And what we do is the team will kind of work on this how might we question. You know, how can we create an open world game where the team will choose their own adventures and to achieve a common goal. And as you see, we have a number of areas that the team have actually brainstormed, different post-its that have been added to the board. We go through this very broad area of ideation. We're not trying to be very specific at this stage. What we want is a large quantity of ideas. From this point of view, we actually start to go around the room and we actually ask everyone to vote on the ideas that we like. And these are the ones that are actually visible here with the green post-it notes with a little dot voting that we've done. So you can understand that these are the ideas that we find valuable as a team and we've evaluated for further design development. So one of those was choose your own time in history. Another was pay for costumes and weapons. Obviously, there was a comment that someone said, look good to feel good. So this was obviously something that came through those insights. And obviously we see multiple different ideas that we've kind of gathered through, including time travel, portals into other times and adventures, etc. So after this, we go through to a more kind of focused ideation session. We have a lot of ideas. Now what we need to do is actually focus those ideas down to be more kind of concentrated onto a specific design that we'll then kind of prototype and evaluate later. So we went through this exercise called round robin. Obviously, based on these ideas that we actually generated from the first session, we did a storyboard, storytelling kind of a process where one person has a starting point for the story, and as we call it round robin, it passes to the next individual to add another piece of information or another angle to that story. After we did all of this ideation, we actually went through multiple rounds of this round robin exercise with actually a storyline and also the type of characters that we would actually use. We ended up having again another voting session, and we actually narrowed down all of those into just a selection of different ideas. So one was the epic quest, how someone will kind of, or someone or a team of people will go on this epic quest across a big kind of expanse of time. The idea of history and kind of a backstory. What would the backstory be? There would need to be a main mission and mini missions and other little ideas that came along in terms of the overall kind of concept of the design stage. As you can see from this, we've gone from a very broad perspective and we're finally ending up on a more narrowed perspective. And the next stage of this design process will be to develop a prototype that enriches these final ideas that we've actually voted upon. Okay, now we're in the final stage of the design thinking process, which is the last stage of the solution process, which is about delivery. Here, what we're trying to do is to put the actual ideas and the ideation that we've actually developed in our design phase into a working prototype. It doesn't have to be something complex or difficult. Just the idea is to evaluate a prototype with the user. The part of the delivery phase that's very important for us actually is the feedback from the users. We actually want to really understand if the ideas that we've actually created are viable for them and can actually be moved forward. Another part of this process with the delivery is that the feedback that we get from the users can also enhance the prototype we're developing. So what does a prototype mean? A prototype basically is any kind of simple way of evaluating an idea through either a paper markup. It could be a sketch, it could be a storyboard that's written across some post-it notes, or it can be a model or something very elaborate, such as a digital clickable prototype. The overall goal here is not to spend a lot of time and effort and money in terms of developing a prototype. As you're doing the idea at a very early stage, what you're doing is just to try to make the idea as real enough so that the user can understand, and in this case the gamers can understand, that what this game would look like or how it would behave. And what we'll do now in the next session of Mural is we'll actually show you how we actually went about that process of prototyping first a storyboard, and then second making a more elaborate version of that storyboard that we could then finally test with the users. So basically we've kind of gone through a process now of actually designing our overall solution. What we need to do next is actually create a prototype so we can actually put it in front of the people we interviewed at the beginning of this process, to see if they actually feel that this is a valid idea to actually move forward and actually gain some feedback and insights from them about the actual designs that we've come up with. So at this point, we're trying to initially, when we do a prototyping exercise, what we're trying to do is just enough of a design, just enough of a prototype to actually validate the idea and the process. So here, obviously, we're developing a game, and it's a little bit difficult to actually make a full game and a full experience. And it would also defeat the whole point of actually doing a design thinking exercise. The idea here is to validate very quickly an idea. So we did this in two parts for this particular process. The first part of that was to actually analyze and look at the different features within a game. So to try to enhance the overall concept that we'd actually created and develop this narrative, develop our characters, develop the characteristics of our player and our prototype, and actually to pull together the whole story about how this actual prototype would be built and what the game would actually be about. So moving further down the page, what you'll actually see is, obviously here we have the post-it notes that showing all the different ideas we have. We have the Higgs boson kind of disaster that inspired the whole story that we actually developed within the game. And then we have different aspects of that game in terms of how the players engage, how the players change, how they can actually be adjusted, how we travel through this whole kind of epic adventure that we've actually created. So I'm moving down to, which is obviously a much more elaborate prototype now. And as you can see, this prototype that we've created here, even though it's quite elaborate in terms of its overall look and feel, it's actually just clip art and images created, taken from online to create some kind of mood board that actually tells the story of what we're doing with this game. So as you can see, we have this name called Time Shift. This was one that the design team felt kind of summarized roughly what this game would be about. It's not the final title, it's just a working title that we have. And then we've kind of developed in the background all of these different images to actually enhance the overall storytelling that we're actually going to show our users. So I'm digging into detail now about all of these areas. So it starts off the story with what we call the experiment. This is where a group of scientists are trying to replicate the beginning of the universe using the Hadron Collider at CERN Institute in Switzerland. They're conducting this experiment when something goes very wrong. So obviously we're building up the suspense and the starting point for this game. Next week, we go to our characters, our actual characters within the game, who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is a group of friends that they're on a trip across Europe. They're enjoying a wonderful view of the Alps in Switzerland, and suddenly the ground starts shaking below them. There's an explosion, a flash of light. This is where they kind of the disaster starts to unfold, and this group of friends get sucked through this light or portal that kind of takes them through back into time. The idea is that you just get a glimpse of the people seeing the world exploding as they get pulled and sucked through into time. So after this, we go to the fourth area here, which is called infected by powers. And as they're falling back through time, you can imagine all of this light flashing and them kind of being hit by particles from this experiment. And they start to change and mutate and actually gain physical powers and different skills and abilities. So these very ordinary people become a little bit more extraordinary as a group of individuals. And also one of the skills that they pick up is obviously traveling through time. The idea is that on the 5th stage here is that we see that this is kind of our backstory to the game, and the story really of the game starts on point 5. So we've introduced the game, we've got the users to understand, the gamers to understand what the characteristics of the game is and how the game will be kind of played, and it has a narrative that we can kind of start to follow. So the idea is that obviously these gamers have dropped into a particular time. They've gone 5,000 years in the past. It's just an indicative time, and they soon realize that in this particular space that they have these strange abilities. So obviously our game would start at this point. Maybe they get attacked by monsters or dinosaurs, or obviously not dinosaurs, but they get attacked by some kind of villain at this point in time, and they have to fight, and they learn that they have actually developed these skills. From this, the storyline could continue, and they obviously realize that then instead of just being alone and isolated, that they have this plan and this ability to jump through time and move forward through time to actually maybe stop these whole events from happening in the beginning. So this is the idea of the overall process, story of how this adventure begins, this epic adventure begins. But obviously there needs to be a little bit more of a twist than them just going back in time and then going forward in time. So the twist here in the game is that they can only travel for a certain amount of time traveling through time a certain distance. So that certain distance will then obviously takes them through all the periods of human history and evolution, the main events since this 5,000 year period has happened. So this could be obviously Persia, Egypt, China, the Greeks, the Romans. It can encompass any type of genre and area that we actually want these individuals to play through. So in the game itself, there is this like one big goal that we're trying to go through, which is obviously to save the planet and go back in time to the future to actually stop this event from actually occurring. But in between that, they have all of these mini missions. And if you remember through the research that we had and some of the storytelling that we also started to develop, missions and having these small tasks to do inside the game was something that the gamers want, as well as this massive expanse and open gaming platform that we're actually creating by being able to travel through all of these different missions. So the idea is that every time this group of friends, these characters, are actually jumping through time, they would have to go into a certain time period and adapt their characteristics and learn about this certain time period in order for them not to conquer the obstacles in front of them and actually win the actual mission and complete their overall goals. They would only be able to jump in time to maybe another time if they completed their missions. Either this, or we could have an area where you could play multiple players, could be played in multiple time zones, so we can add a level of complexity here. These are ideas that we'll talk with when we're doing the user testing with the gamers. We'll actually validate these ideas and develop an overall concept. Added to this idea of the missions is a certain twist that we wanted to do. The idea of the time-based travel. Obviously, if you do something in time, you can actually change time. But what about if the changing of time, you had to do sometimes some things good, and you had sometimes to be a bad person. So this brings us on to the 7th point, which we found would be a nice twist within the game. So in order for us to actually achieve those missions and move forward in time, maybe sometimes we have to be the villain in these actual missions in order to achieve the good at the end. So this is the overall approach of the good and the evil. Then on the 8th point, we talk about the players, and our players, we obviously have discussed this idea of this being a group of friends. We see this as a game maybe with 4 to 6 players, depending on how many friends an individual player wants to have with how many friends they have as a team. But obviously we also have to think about the individual player. So also there will be the ability for a person to either join another team or to create its own team and be, it could be AI driven rest of the other team. One of the important things here with the players is that obviously they have the ability dress in the things that they want, but they have to dress within character in the period as well. So this idea of look good to feel good is also built into the game here in this area that we're actually doing with the game players. The other thing that's important is a certain aspect of stealthiness, you would say, within the game. If you get discovered in time here as a person traveling from the future to the past, then obviously you may have an impact on time. So this is also an element that they can't be exposed in as well, in terms of the way that the game plays. And the other things that we've dropped in there as well are things like Easter eggs. So obviously within the game, as the characters are playing through these very vast and elaborate open world game areas, we'll have Easter eggs where they can actually discover, find new powers. Maybe they get some new clothes or some new clue that can help them on a future mission. And finally, we have this the last part of this story that we want to tell the users when we discuss this prototype, is that the players will be able to control their own destiny. It's very important that they will be able to jump through time, but also maybe they have the ability to jump through time in small jumps, maybe within a game, or maybe rewind or pause time. Some way that them allowing them to go through this this mass web of a time epic adventure, also with many time jumps. But they have to be super careful about this, because whatever they do, and this thread runs all the way through the game, they have to be very, very careful that they don't change the future too much, or otherwise the destiny, they will destroy their own future. So this is a lot about strategy and planning and kind of working together to overcome the task. So as you can see, obviously we've kind of gone through and really elaborated on this initial story we have. This is purely in order to actually get the users to be fully immersed in the idea of the story, not the actual look, not the visuals, not the graphics, but the actual storytelling. So it can help us actually explain to them and enable us to actually tell that story a little bit better. And in the next stages, what you'll see is the reaction from those people that we interviewed in the beginning, having a reaction to the game that we've developed based on the things that they've actually told us. So testing, this is obviously, you've seen now that we have this wonderful prototype that we've generated in a very short period of time. It's obviously not perfect, it's just a prototype, but still we want to put this in front of our users and gather some information about the idea that we've generated. Does this idea resonate with the people that we've actually designed this for? Has it got some areas that we haven't seen, or are there some other things that they could maybe enhance this design with their own input? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a testing phase with the gamers that we interviewed in the beginning, and we're going to put this prototype in front of them. When you're doing user testing, it's a little bit of a similar process to how you test, you do your customer interviews at the beginning, your interview process. You have a very similar kind of setup. It's one person with someone else making notes, but also on top of that, maybe you'll also have additional people viewing the kind of interviews. Maybe they're recorded as in this session, or maybe you even have live recording of those sessions. What's very important with the user testing, though, is to let the user explore the actual prototype themselves. Try to let them obviously take time and understand what the prototype is, and leave them a lot of space within the testing for them to actually give us feedback. So try to leave those quiet moments within the user testing so that they actually speak and give us ideas. And if they have an idea, encourage them to tell us more and more. So after me talking for such a very long time, it's now going to be a lot better to actually see some of the actual gamers tell us what they really think about the design we put together.
I actually was visualizing it completely when you were going through the whole story. So I was feeling I was inside the game. I think the game is more of a whole story experience rather than just a simple game. Like you're getting into the story more, like as I mentioned right now, while you were explaining, I'm already inside that story. I'm imagining myself as a character in the game and like going through those phases as you mentioned. So yeah, that's amazing. And the eye catcher for me was the good or evil bit, the number 7, which you mentioned, because that's something interesting. Now, for example, once you start the game, it's like you select a character and you just go on a same base, like a same single storyline. But if you have a twist in between the game, like to choose if you need to take a good part or the evil part, that would be really cool. I guess, like, I haven't personally played any such game which gives me an option like in between the whole story mode. So that's really cool. Okay, so in that case, y'all can actually implement both the things, like having an offline story mode as we were just going through it, and an online mode. Like once you complete you have multiple options basically. Like you can go with the basic story mode, which would be a offline platform, and your progress gets saved like on a local drive, which normal games do. And then I have an online like multiplayer option also. So like your team is basically competing with others. Like again, you can use the concept of multiverses. So like people from different multiverses are merging up in the online platform. So yeah, that could be a good thing for the game. Like I would be very engaged with that concept. Yeah, why not, for sure. These days it's more about the socializing rather than just the gaming. Like a single player mode is, yes, it's good just for a typical gamer to pass time. But if the person is looking for more socializing, obviously we need friends to play with. So like as mentioned, each character has different powers, so their powers should complement each other. Like for example, if I can attack, maybe my partner can defend. The other one, maybe he can create a shield. The other one might be able to assist you with something. So depending on the concept, like for example, weapons, like if you're planning to introduce like different types of weapons, maybe if one person has a laser gun ray, like for example, the other person might have a shield creator or something. So that will shield out the whole team from getting damage from the opponent or whatever it is. So there are a lot of possibilities we can go around with the game. And also like in this timeline, you all can introduce some maybe some small enemies in between, like maybe a group of enemies, like the time protector or something as such, who will be like jumping in between the stories and stopping the team from going ahead. So you need to defeat them and go ahead with it or something like that.
I like the idea because there aren't many time shifting games. I feel like at the current moment. It's cool. I like that you can play it alone or with friends, because it's hard to get a group of 4 to 6 people to play at the same time, I feel like. So that's pretty cool. I like the storyboard. It's cool. Maybe a little bit cliche with the scientists going wrong with their experiment, but it's good. It's not that bad. I think it doesn't matter, since the rest of the story is pretty cool. How you get to go 5,000 years back and then progress through the different time zones, I guess, throughout human history. Would be cool maybe if you could go even further back in time, more than 5,000 years. I like history, so going back in time is actually something very cool. Time shift or moving within time is pretty cool concept to me. I love movies like these, like Interstellar and all of these types of movies. So this is just intriguing for my personality. I do enjoy these type of stories, let's say. Maybe the one thing that I actually could add is maybe if you have other side missions or other stuff that I have that are not part of the story necessarily, that won't get me to the end, which is saving the world or making it explode. So side missions would be great, because sometimes I just don't want to do the story right now, or want to level up before completing this mission or something. So having stuff on the side, that's the other point though. Missions, what would I do? Honestly, this is a very tough question.
Okay.
Just fun, I guess. Giving me the option to decide with any one of them, making it interactive. So I don't want to make decisions by myself. I actually want to play these decisions as well. Does the game end?
This is to be decided.
I definitely keep it going.
Keep it going.
Let me travel through all the time periods if I want to do some side missions in the Persian time or something. It'd be cool. Just even if I'm done with the main mission, just keep other stuff on the side.
Okay.
I would check again. This game, in terms of the concept, is very close to Assassin's Creed, so I would check those games out and see how they do it, because it's very similar concept.
Good and evil I love as well, especially the way you described it. Initially, I had my reservations that it's either black or white, but you said that sometimes you need to side with the evil to get the good outcome. So you have that gray area enlisted as well, and this is something that I love, and especially when it comes to storytelling. Controlling your destiny as well. Like, I'm a fan of multiple endings, and I actually stay away from games that are linear. in that retrospect. Like, I hate it when the game has one ending because, like, I don't know, compared to other games, it feels like there's not a lot of freedom, or there's not a lot of consequences, let's say, in the way you play. And having different endings kind of like give you the taste of the consequences of how you played the game. So control your destiny is definitely a big plus. Now, going back to the experiment, initially I was like, oh my God, we're getting this generic start in which scientists did something wrong and we have to clean up the mess. Kind of like, I see this in a lot of games, like this idea, I think it's kind of being overused in a way. So I don't know, maybe like angling it a bit differently might solve that issue, but yeah, I'm not entirely convinced about the start, because if you want to make this like unique, having a generic start is maybe, it might put people off, especially when you advertise the game, let's say. But rather than just starting with the experiment, you can start with the kids straight away. And the experiment is something that they'll start to, the experiment can be overarching throughout the entire story. You don't have to introduce it straight away. Kind of make it more mysterious at the beginning, because that's what's going to keep people more engaged with the story. So I say starting with the kids and the explosion straight away, gamers are going to be like, what's going on? We need to like deep dive, and you're going to be in the shoes of the character as well. The character doesn't know there was an experiment. You don't know there was an experiment. As you progress through the missions, you start to like collect these little bits of infos here and there, and you start to learn, oh, there was an experiment. Okay. That's a more unique approach to introducing the experiment beginning. For your particular story, I think there has to be an end. Like, you either save the world or you break it, pretty much. So this is one of the challenges that most games today actually face. Like, what happens after you complete the story? Like, Assassin's Creed does it well because the story doesn't really end at that one particular point. There's end game activities and future content as well, since they continuously update the games, release new DLC content that expands on the story, or rather continues the story and gets people more engaged with the game. So like having a cliffhanger could keep the story going. Like, say the main characters will have to revisit some of these time zones and revisit, maybe not necessarily revisit the missions, but maybe get extra bits of info here and there to understand what's going on, to have a clearer vision of what's going on, to set them up for, say, the extra content that you have planned later on.
I suppose the final question is, would you play this game?
Of course. I'm already hooked. Especially because I love history, and this is a game about time traveling, and I can see the options: ancient Rome, China, the Cold War. Oh, I'll definitely play this game, 100%.
So now we're kind of, we've had some fantastic feedback from the gamers, and we can obviously understand we have some work to do. And their insight is invaluable, because obviously these are people that are gaming all the time. We're not gamers, we're designers, so we don't have exactly the same way of looking at a game as these people do. So once we have the kind of feedback, we need to kind of capture this in a structured way, so we understand what is the best way to move the prototype that we've actually done forward. How we evaluate the design, we evaluate it through several different areas. We use a positive feedback. We actually define in one corner. Anything that we need to change goes in the top right. In the bottom, we're looking for fresh new ideas. This is where we capture those. And then finally, any questions we have. So this is a simple feedback grid, and we use this process to really evaluate whether the actual design that we have developed needs a lot of iteration, or it needs a small iteration, or we start again through the whole design process.
So, Mark, we've spent an enjoyable afternoon listening to users and getting their feedback from them. And I guess now is the time to really capture their feedback into the mural. So if we start thinking about what actually worked well.
I really liked their enthusiasm. It was almost like infectious listening to their comments that they had. And I really appreciated the way that they actually saw themselves inside the game. I think it was Sean that said, you know, I can imagine myself in the game, which was quite surprising considering the level of fidelity of the idea was quite low in terms of what we created. But it was very nice that they could project themselves inside that game. I really liked also the fact that they all got instantly, we love the idea of this good and evil. This was kind of a really nice kind of surprise for them, and I think that they kind of gone through the whole game story and it was like, oh wow, this is amazing. It's a really nice positive thing. And the other thing overall, I mean, it was the standout comments from all of them is like they all wanted to play this game, which was very, very positive. True.
So if we think about what didn't work, so that there were some common themes. In fact, we had a couple of them tell us what they thought, particularly of the beginning, which was the cliche scientist get something wrong. We've seen this all before in movies and games and whatnot. We had a couple linking it back to Assassin's Creed, which was interesting as well, and the ending of the game, or the fact that the game might end. So they asked quite a few questions as we went through the process as well. And I guess the most common questions were things like what happens during the missions, a bit more about how does the game end, because we, as you mentioned, had left that a little vague, and some details around how we alter time. So they were asking some really great questions, Mark.
Yeah, these questions showed their kind of enthusiasm for the game. They really wanted to see it realized, and you could see that they were looking into the detail. It was they wanted to see how they could get this game to work almost themselves. And it also showed a little bit of how low fidelity the design was, because we hadn't got that depth of information at this point, because we were checking if that kind of the mission state would work, if it had the right kind of feeling as an overall game. This was more of our priority.
The other fantastic thing that came out of these interviews was the ideas that they then contributed.
I kind of really loved the feedback we were getting. It was amazing. I mean, also I think in a way we kind of had one participant and basically solved that problem at the start of the game, which was to basically remove the first stage of the scientists, and that added a whole new kind of angle for me on the game. And I was actually quite thinking we should have thought about that ourselves before we actually developed it. But it was really also very nice that they added also extra kind of angles onto the game throughout the whole process. Particularly this idea of adding clues inside the game for the group to find, and then they're kind of piecing together their future as well, their new future, in order to go forward. And also I liked very much this idea of the multiverse. And obviously as you're creating these things and designing, you're automatically starting to get inspired about what you could actually do next in terms of these ideation sessions, let's say.
So I guess then, Mark, the next question for us is, and this is why we do this part of the process, why we test with users, is to actually then think about, all right, if we go back to our design, what would we change? And also, would we take this game forward based on the feedback? Do we think we've got a strong enough idea that people would actually engage in, want to use? What's your verdict on that question, Mark?
I think we're kind of onto a bit of a winner chicken dinner. Yeah, so basically I think we had some pretty good results from the research. It was very positive, and I mean, if I was moving the game forward to the next stage, I mean, definitely we have to fix the priority. Number one would be how the scientist element gets removed. I think the first stage is about this group of people perhaps finding some clues, maybe some debris has kind of gone through with them with some pieces of paper with clues on or something to help them piece this story together. And I think definitely for me, I really like this multiverse ending and the ability to kind of, the game never ends. I think the idea of it continuously working with, maybe they change the past. The future then has another disaster a little bit further down the line. There are so many avenues to explore there that it's really worth exploring further, I think. What about yourself?
Absolutely. This has been such a great project to work on, so interesting. And the fact that we in the design team were able to come up with an idea that we could put forward in front of actual gamers, where it was a credible idea that really, I think, spoke to their insights, spoke to the information that they gave us, and really aligned with the types of games that they liked to play. And I think we saw the success of being able to capture what is it that motivates and drives people as they play these games, and we were able to then put all of that insight into a prototype or an idea that then, you know, naturally they liked and enjoyed because we'd heard them, we'd listened to them. So I thought that was one of the fun parts of the whole process for me. So you can see through this process that design thinking is not only just for designers. Anyone can go through this methodology to get the best outcome for their game, for their product, for their business. Design thinking is very much human-centered. We focus on our users, we focus on their motivations, their needs, and we gather insights to create the best solution we can. This is very much a collaborative process. You saw that we engaged a team of people to come up with ideas. We worked together to come up with the solution. We also know that design thinking can help us define and solve these very complex problems. We saw that design thinking helps us reduce costs and increase revenues because what we do through the iterative feedback and user testing, we can actually save time, save money by getting feedback very quickly in the process so that we don't design the wrong game, the wrong product or the wrong solution, so that our customers, our users, whoever we're designing for, can reap the benefits. And design thinking can be practiced by anyone. This is a very simple approach that helps us design great solutions for very complex problems. Over to you now. Any questions?
Thank you, Nico, and thank you, Mark. It was extremely insightful and exciting to go over the design thinking process in this depth and detail. And I would surely hope that some of our participants on the session today will leave it energized and maybe motivated to take the leap and try put their hands on their own design thinking process towards building a game. So without further delay, let's take a look at some of the questions that we have received over the course of the presentation today, and let's try to answer them. The questions will be directed to Mark, and I will start right away. So Mark, one of the questions that I think is very valid that we have received is that how long does this design thinking process typically take? Is it too exhaustive or is it too long?
It really depends on the actual problem that you're trying to solve. You can actually run a design thinking process in a couple of hours, or it could be a couple of days, or in this case over a week. And it depends on that complexity and also the time when you're actually taking on that design thinking challenge. Obviously, at the beginning, we were kind of we're developing a kind of game. It's a complex starting point, so therefore you need a little bit more time. But if you're in the middle of a process, you can actually say, oh, we have design thinking opportunity here to actually quickly do something. You could actually do a 2-hour session to actually solve a problem. So it really all depends. Yeah.
Absolutely. And where would our curious participants go for further information? What would be the good sources to begin the journey of learning more about design thinking?
There's a lot of information online, and I would make a start there. I would actually look at IDEO, the people who actually came up with the process. You saw that in the history. There's actually a website called IDEO-U, which is their university, which has some online resources. Interaction.org also have some pretty good material in terms of starting points and also some shorter courses. And you can also find some great material from the D School, Stanford D School, which is the design school there. So these are very good resources that you can actually use.
All right, I think this is pretty insightful, Mark. Maybe one last question that we just received, and we will conclude with that one. Is that, is it important to do design thinking for small games like casual games, or is it mostly tailored towards a more complex and more encompassing endeavors such as AAA games, for example?
Design thinking can be used in any kind of complex tasks. I think what you have to try to use design thinking for is when you have this uncertainty. We touch upon this idea of wicked problems. It's also a little bit about that uncertainty. So you can use it as a smaller process or a larger process, depending on what you do. But the ideal point here is that you use that to engage, to sort of speed up that process and do it in a low-cost way.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you very much, Mark. It was extremely insightful session. And in the interest of time, and before we jump into our next session, which is going to be the entrepreneur journey, I would like to thank you all for participating and enjoying the session together with us. I would like to also say thanks to Ministry of Communications and Information Technology team, without whom we would not be able to provide this content to you today. So thanks once again, and let's hope to see you in our next session. Thank you very much.